Bradley Beal, you are a Phoenix Sun after today. The Suns have traded Chris Paul, Landry Shamet, multiple second-round picks, and a couple pick swaps to the Washington Wizards for Bradley Beal. The Suns somehow traded 0 first-rounders in this trade, and apparently that's due to Beal's no-trade clause limiting the Wizards' ability to go out and get a trade that really benefits them. And now Washington is expected to shop Chris Paul to trade him to a contender because that's what Chris Paul wants, because apparently he's addicted to the finals. I don't know what you're going to get for 38-year-old Chris Paul at this point, just him. But apparently the LA Clippers are leading the charge in trading for Chris Paul as of right now, which I don't even want to imagine what a Chris Paul and Russell Westbrook backcourt would look like. That would just be a mess. But hey, if that's what LA Clippers fans can convince themselves, they are away from winning a championship, which I don't think anyone's ever been a Chris Paul away from winning a championship. Bradley Beal's counting stats last year was 23.2 points per game, roughly 4 rebounds, and roughly 5 assists a game on 50.6% shooting from the field. Now, who exactly does this trade benefit? Because if you look on paper, you would say that the Suns got Bradley Beal for essentially what is nothing. I mean, they traded for a star caliber player, and all they had to give up was old-ass Chris Paul, Landry Shamet, and a couple second-round picks. I mean, it says multiple. What does that mean? 3, 4 second-round picks? I mean, we were watching people trade 4 or 5 second-round picks for Josh Richardson. You know what I mean? And those pick swaps, I assume, because they don't have any available first-rounders, that those would also be second-round picks. So it would just be the best second-round pick they can get. But I see this trade, right? And I saw this rumor earlier in the week. I mean, this was like maybe 2 days ago, tops, where David Aldridge and Josh Robbins of The Athletic reported that the Heat were willing to offer Kyle Lowry, who's on an expiring contract, Duncan Robinson, and multiple first-round picks to Washington in exchange for Bradley Beal. Now, I get you don't really want to bet on the Miami Heat being a bad team, especially when you trade Bradley Beal to the Miami Heat, who were just in the finals. But if you got some down the road first round picks, I'm talking like 2027, 2029, that's a fair bet. And I know you have to rebuild now, and that's the whole idea, but I can't help but think that if you're just going to give up Chris Paul anyway, Kyle Lowry, who, while yes, is on a much larger contract than he's actually worth, and Duncan Robinson, who is the exact same, he's pretty much just Davis Bertans, but slightly better and can actually shoot in the clutch. Actually, Game 6 exists. Look, I'm not saying it's miles better. Like, both of these trades for Bradley Beal in a good situation where Bradley Beal was not on a ridiculously large max contract and he didn't have a no trade clause, you could get a much better trade package for Bradley Beal. But as the market dictates, Bradley Beal with an immensely large contract and a no-trade clause really limits what the Washington Wizards had at their disposal, because they pretty much could only trade, well, not pretty much, they had to trade Bradley Beal to a team he wanted to go to. And I assume Bradley Beal is at the stage of his career where if he really wanted to just get his money and hang out, he could stay at the Wizards, but he wants to win a championship, so he wants to go to a team that at least has a chance. Miami Heat and Phoenix Suns maybe have a chance, but you have to look at those first round picks and be like, those picks mean much more to our franchise than Landry Shamet. Those picks mean much more to us than dealing Chris Paul for what? Like another bench player and another second round pick? The Clippers are not going to offer that much for Chris Paul, because you know Chris Paul is not playing in a Washington Wizards jersey. Like, that's a poverty franchise. Sorry, Wizards fans, I didn't have to go to your neck like that. Obviously, the Washington Wizards couldn't get very much for Bradley Beal. Otherwise, they would have. If they really wanted to get something for him, they would have traded him before he signed that big-ass contract with the no-trade clause. That's what they would have done if they were smart and realized that they needed to rebuild, because John Wall hasn't been on that team and hasn't been playing with them for 4 years. I was wrong, actually. It's been 5 years since John Wall has played in a Washington Wizards jersey, and the Washington Wizards are still building their team like they still have John Wall there. They don't. I mean, wasn't Monte Morris your starting point guard this year? Like, who are we pretending to be right now? By the way, they should play Quentin Jackson more. That guy is a stud. He could be a very good player in the NBA. He just hasn't gotten the reps yet. Anyway, let's flip our viewpoint right now and see it from the Phoenix Suns angle. The Phoenix Suns now have 5 players under contract for next year. Obviously, Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, and then you've got Cam Payne, who's still under contract, and now you have Bradley Beal. and that's it. So now the Phoenix Suns have to fit 2 to 3 roster spots with good rotational players that you're comfortable with playing a decent amount of minutes. I'm talking 15 to 25 with players that you're either going to sign on mid-level exceptions, which you only have one of those because you're already over the luxury tax, and minimum veteran contracts. You could probably get TJ Warren back on a vet minimum. That's one. Torrey Craig, maybe you can get on that mid-level exception. Bring back Torrey Craig, TJ Warren. So you got a nice solid 7-man rotation there. Then you can sign Jock Landale to a minimum because he's not going to get much more than that. That's an 8-man rotation. And you've brought back essentially the roster you had last year, but instead of having Landry Shamet and Chris Paul, you have Bradley Beal. That's pretty good. If you're the Phoenix Suns, you got to be decently happy with that because you didn't have a bench to start with. Now you especially don't have a bench, but now you're off of Chris Paul's contract. You brought in another player that can at least contribute more and doesn't get injured every playoffs and doesn't choke. And then I guess you round out the roster with bringing back Bismack Biyombo, throw him a vet minimum, and then you could re-sign Damian Lee and Darius Bazley to minimums, and then Ish Wainwright, I'm pretty sure, is on a team option right now, which I assume they'll pick that up and pay his minimum as well. And then I guess that's your roster for next year. So you would probably have an 8-man rotation of Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, DeAndre Ayton, Cam Payne, which maybe you start him, maybe you don't. And then you've got Torrey Craig as your mid-level exception, and then you've got TJ Warren, Damian Lee. You could maybe, I feel like Josh Okogie's on the move. I feel like he's not coming back. They've got too many of that 3-and-D type player. TJ Warren and Torrey Craig would already fill that role. So Josh Okogie probably on the move. Terrence Ross definitely out of there as well. But I think Biyombo will come back on that vet minimum. I think Jock Landale will also be back on a minimum, and Darius Bazley will also be back on a minimum. And yeah, that's the Phoenix Suns roster for next year, I assume. That's my guess. They're probably not done making deals. Maybe Cam Payne is on the move. Maybe DeAndre Ayton is still going to get traded this season, but I feel like they might hold on to DeAndre Ayton, mostly because now Frank Vogel is the coach, and he doesn't have that weird relationship with Frank Vogel like he did with Monty Williams. We know now that Matt Ishbia definitely wanted to make a stamp on this team. That's part of the reason why Monty Williams is now coaching the Detroit Pistons. But also, it had a lot to do, I assume, with the fact that him and DeAndre Ayton simply didn't get along. And the Phoenix Suns decided that they would rather keep DeAndre Ayton than keep Monty Williams. Was that the right decision? I'm not here to tell you whether it is or isn't. It's possible it was a terrible decision and that the Pistons are going to get a great coach, but it's also possible that now DeAndre Ayton, with a new coach, is going to come out of his shell and play like the superstar they are paying him to be. If DeAndre Ayton plays up to his contract, the Phoenix Suns are a very dangerous team. If he does not, frankly, they don't have a bench, and one bad injury, and really, this team is a shell of itself again. So overall, all things included, this does limit the Phoenix Suns in the cap space department. But they didn't have any cap space to really play with anyway, so getting off of Chris Paul's contract, getting rid of Landry Shamet because you had to do that, and then getting rid of only a couple second-round picks and a couple pick swaps for Bradley Beal, while it could be a bad deal, it's kind of a good deal for the Phoenix Suns because that's a cheap price to pay for Bradley Beal. Do I think it really makes the Phoenix Suns that much more dangerous? If they can get the fit right, yes, but I can't help but shake this idea that Devin Booker is just a younger and better Bradley Beal. And if you have a younger and better version of a player, why are you trading for the older, worse version? Is that just to have more firepower? Because the Brooklyn Nets had James Harden, Kyrie Irving, and Kevin Durant. And I know they played, like 8 games together? My point is that team did not work, and the Phoenix Suns are technically just the worst version of the Brooklyn Nets. And while, yes, DeAndre Ayton was better than Nick Claxton was at the time, and is definitely better than Ben Simmons was on the Brooklyn Nets, I just think that there's too many parallels to draw between the Brooklyn Nets roster of 2 years ago and the Phoenix Suns roster now, that if there's so many parallels, it's just not going to work. And at the very least, with the Brooklyn Nets, you could say Kyrie, KD, and James Harden all played different positions. But with the Phoenix Suns, Bradley Beal and Devin Booker do essentially the exact same thing. So yep, that's my opinion on the Bradley Beal trade. Sorry this upload was a little late. I was at work when this news got dropped, and I was like, that's unfortunate. But yeah, anyway, have a good one.
Colorado over Harvard. He was accepted to Harvard and to play for the Buffalo. Is this the dagger?